My brother stole my inheritance, bragged about his new mansion, and mocked me for being bitter. I sued him, and now my family thinks I'm the villain. I'm a 34-year-old woman, and my older brother John is 38. Growing up, it was pretty obvious to anyone who spent 5 minutes around us that John was the golden child. He was always the charming one, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Me. I was the one who was told to let things go, to be the bigger person, to understand that John just has a strong personality. I did let things go too many times. I think I just got tired of being painted as the difficult one if I ever pushed back. But after everything he's done, especially in the last few years, I wish I hadn't stayed quiet for so long. Our dad passed away 2 years ago. He wasn't a rich man, but he worked hard his whole life and saved up a decent amount. He also left behind the small business he and Mom had built together. Before he passed, Dad told me he was splitting everything equally between me and John. I thought that was fair. Apparently, John didn't. When we gathered to hear the will, I expected things to go smoothly. But when the lawyer started reading, I realized Dad had left everything to John. The house, the savings, the business, all of it. I couldn't believe it. I actually asked the lawyer if there had been some kind of mistake, and he just shook his head and said this was the most recent version of the will. I looked over at John, who had this smug little smirk on his face, and I knew. He didn't even try to deny it when I confronted him later. Dad trusted me to handle things, he said, like he was doing me a favor. I mean, come on, you don't really need the money, do you? That's the thing about John. He always says things like that, like he's being so reasonable, but he's really just putting you down. When I pointed out that Dad had told me himself that everything would be split equally, John shrugged and said, well, people change their minds. Guess he realized I'd do more with it than you would. That was his justification for taking everything. It wasn't even about need. It was about what he thought he deserved. I tried to let it go for Mom's sake. She kept saying, it's just money. Don't let this tear the family apart. But it wasn't just money. It was everything my dad had worked for, everything he wanted to leave behind for both of us. And John had twisted it to suit himself. A few months later, John moved into this giant new mansion. He threw a housewarming party and invited the whole family, like he wanted everyone to see how great his life was. I didn't want to go, but Mom begged me, so I went. The house was ridiculous. Chandeliers, marble floors, a pool in the backyard that looked like something out of a celebrity's Instagram. He gave this big tour, pointing out all the custom features and saying things like, yeah, Dad's money really came through for me. At one point, he turned to me and said, I guess you're still renting, huh? Must be tough. It was so casual, like he wasn't actively mocking me. I lost it. I said, you mean the money you stole from me? Yeah, it must be nice. The room went dead quiet. John's wife, who's just as bad as he is, tried to smooth things over by saying, oh, come on, it's all family money anyway. What's the big deal? The big deal, I said, is that my dad wanted us to share it, and John decided he knew better. That's the big deal. John snapped back. You're just jealous because I've actually done something with it. You'd probably waste it on rent and groceries or whatever. I left after that. I couldn't stay in that house another minute. After the party, I started digging into things. Something didn't sit right with me about the will. Dad wasn't the kind of guy to play favorites like that. Sure enough, I found an earlier draft of the will in some of Dad's old files. It was exactly what he told me it would be. Everything split 50/50ths. The date on the draft was just a couple of months before the version John had submitted. I showed it to Mom, hoping she'd back me up, but she just looked tired. What's done is done, she said. Your brother needs that money more than you do. You're independent, and he's got a family to think about. It was the same excuse I'd heard my whole life. John needs it more. John's more important. I wasn't going to let it slide this time. I hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit to challenge the will. When John got served, he lost his mind. He called me screaming about how I was tearing the family apart and ruining his life. He actually had the nerve to say, "You're so bitter. I've worked hard for everything I have." Worked hard? He literally manipulated our dad into giving him everything and then flaunted it like it was his own achievement. It was during the legal process that the real dirt came out. My lawyer found emails between John and Dad's lawyer that showed John had pressured Dad to change the will. He claimed it was what the family wanted and that Dad's memory wasn't what it used to be. That's when it hit me. John had taken advantage of Dad when he was vulnerable. It wasn't just selfish, it was cruel. During the trial, everything came out in the open. My lawyer presented those emails to the court. It was clear that John had manipulated the situation to make himself look like the hero who would handle everything. When the emails were read aloud, you could see him squirming in his seat. He tried to act unfazed, but it was obvious he was panicking. John's lawyer didn't have much to work with, so they tried to spin the narrative that I was just bitter and jealous. At one point, his lawyer even said, "Isn't it true that you've always resented your brother for being more successful?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like they thought if they said it with enough confidence, it would suddenly become true. The turning point was when my lawyer pulled out a text John had sent to one of his friends. In the message, he bragged about how he'd finally convinced the old man to sign the new will and joked about using the money to buy his dream house. It was so blatantly arrogant that even the judge looked annoyed. The ruling came down in my favor. The original will was reinstated, and I got my fair share of the inheritance. John was furious. He stormed out of the courtroom without even looking at me. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. Not long after the trial, John started telling everyone in the family that I had ruined his life. He called me a gold digger and said I was obsessed with money. He even went so far as to tell people that I had faked the evidence in court. A few relatives actually believed him, which just made things worse. At a family barbecue, John cornered me in front of everyone and said, "Do you even realize what you've done? My kids are suffering because of you." I snapped back. "Your kids are suffering because you spent their future inheritance on a mansion you didn't need." That shut him up, but only for a moment. His wife chimed in with, "This is why nobody likes you. You're so negative all the time." "Right," I said. "Because calling out someone for stealing is so negative." "My bad." After that, I started avoiding family gatherings altogether. It wasn't worth the stress. But John wasn't done being entitled. A few months later, he showed up at Mom's house and demanded that she give him all of Dad's personal items, his old watch, his chess set, and even some family photos. Mom didn't know how to handle it, so she called me. When I got there, John was already going through Dad's stuff, picking out what he wanted. I told him to stop, and he laughed like I was being unreasonable. "Why do you care? You got your money. Isn't that enough?" "It's not about the money," I said. "You don't get to take everything just because you feel like it." He tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. I told him if he didn't put everything back, I'd call the cops. That finally got him to leave, but not before he made a big scene about how I was destroying the family. It didn't stop there. At one point, John actually tried to sell some of Dad's old things. Stuff that had no monetary value but meant a lot to us emotionally. I ended up buying them back just to keep them safe. It felt like a losing battle every time. Then, in the most ridiculous move of all, John sent me a message saying he was willing to forgive me for taking him to court, but only if I paid him a reconciliation fee to cover his legal expenses. I couldn't believe the nerve. I told him to shove it and blocked his number. Mom keeps telling me to make peace with John, but I don't see the point. He's shown me who he is over and over again, and I'm finally done pretending he'll change. I've gone low contact with him and most of the family, and honestly, it's been a relief. Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled things differently, but then I think about everything he's done, and I know I made the right choice. People like John don't stop unless you make them. I haven't spoken to him in months, and the last I heard, he's trying to convince the family to go on a reconciliation trip. But only if I pay for it. Yeah, that's not happening.